Greetings, listeners. You're listening to Colourful online and on DAB. A very warm welcome from me, Kenneth Tharp. I'm delighted to be back on Colourful in this second interview related to the African concert series. People associate very much with traditional African music is its connection with dance. Now I'm trying to think what's the best thing to ask here. Do you feel that sort of sensibility and that cultural connection is as strong in the classical music that's coming from the continent and in some of the composers whose work you're playing?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, Africans, or in fact Nigerians, I can speak for at least, they dance. They find any excuse to dance. It could be a funeral, it could be a wedding, everything, movement and dance is just such a natural expression of how they feel. Well, many of the composers out there are really digging deep and working hard to try and find bits of material that they want to present using the Western classical notation to Nigerian composers. So I thought each one, in a sense, sort of explains how the piano can be used. It can be used in a sort of African rhythmic kind of way, whereby you're using the piano almost like a drum. So the rhythm is not so much about the melodies, even though the melodies come from Nigerian, for traditional music. The actual rhythms you're hearing, in a sense, are quite pronounced, and they tend to come from the sort of drumming you would get from specific parts of the Yoruba land. So I find that would be something that captures, the whole concept of African pianist, because my father, he's from the Ibibio tribe, and I discovered, basically because we did an online sort of African concert series performance last time, that there are some composers out there who are listening, and one of them, Peter Silvano, sent me one of his compositions, in fact a couple of them, and one of them is titled Oborum. And this is basically a wooden slit drum that's used at many of these festivals. And so he wrote this piece that's just based on the sort of music you'd hear being played on this particular drum. And again, it's the same concept of rhythm, same concept of drumming, same concept of interesting rhythms. And one of the melodies is really a very sweet, sweet melody from that part of the country.
Glen, you mentioned Akinuba. Tell us a little bit more about him and about your relationship.
Okay, so my relationship with the late Akinuba, Professor Akinuba, goes back to 1977. I was only 4 years old. And we had the Festival of the Arts in Nigeria called Festac 77. And I remember he composed a theme song for that Festac 77. And I remember my mother reminding me, and I was about 4, I was singing out at the top of my voice, Festac 77 is here. And that's where it started. Right back then, I had no clue that I would meet this amazing man many, many years later on, after studying him in textbooks. When my mother was doing sort of Nigerian music composers when we were students at ISI. And that our paths would cross back in 2005 when he was having a series of symposia at Churchill College, University of Cambridge, and he invited me to participate. And that's when he introduced me to a wealth of repertoire that comes from the continent, and this whole movement of composers at the time who are really dedicating their lives to this. And it was around the same time. In fact, Joshua Zoigwe lived down the road to me in university at the time, when I was sort of interested in taking up the piano more seriously. In fact, I came around to the house and gave me one lesson. I remember that very well. But I look back on it and I think to myself, wow, I had this wonderful exposure to this culture. And so, yes, he opened up so many doors for me in terms of understanding this whole new world of Nigerian art music.